Sylvia, we are completely unsupervised today.
That is so scary.
Our producer Ted is not here. Wait, he let me in the producer studio?
Oh, shit's gonna get real.
This is a big deal. First of all, why do you think he chose me to produce instead of you?
Because I'm in Hawaii and you're more responsible. And he's trying to make he's trying to really lift you up.
The Hollow Bunny. And we all feel hollow sometimes.
Welcome, bunnies, to the Hollow Bunny podcast. Welcome back, and welcome if you're just joining us for the very first time. If you are, be prepared to be completely blown away, because I am standing in as the producer for the one and only Ted Madden.
Fucking big deal.
So I'm in charge.
Big deal.
It's a big deal. Yes. I am Kristen Zeman, and I am here with my effervescent, maybe even sunburned, maybe you're sunburned because you're on the beach in Maui, co-host Sylvia Moyer. We are both former police chiefs. Well, you're currently in the policey business. I'm retired. But the Hollow Bunny bot. I'm having trouble speaking today.
You're in charge and you get all like you shit the bed. Come on.
I'm high on power. I'm drunk on it. The Hollow Bunny podcast is not just for cops. It is for anyone who is interested in talking about life and leadership and lessons. I didn't know there was an alliteration in there. That was not purposeful. But these lessons, they fill up the Hollow Bunny metaphorically. Syl, why don't you tell us who's filling our bunny today?
Kristen Zeman, you're not going to believe it. It's Jonae Harrison. I gave the spoiler right at the beginning. Jonae grew up in Oakland. She went to Georgetown for undergrad, Tulane Law School. She served as an attorney over in the Dominican Republic, and she specializes in an array of things in the legal world. Jonae came into my field of view when she was working in Arizona for Chicanos por la Causa and advancing a lot of the initiatives there. She then worked to advance diversity, equity, and inclusion in communities. And now she's a big shot. She's a big ass deal. Big deal. Big deal, Kristen Zeman. So she is the Chief Operations Officer for Adelante. And she is working on sustaining healthy communities. But even more than that, Kristen Zeman, this Jonae Harrison is this incredible mix of service, of soul, of heart, of equity, of inclusion, of this incredible intellect and doing the tough work. She's really a good time. She's a fantastic person. She's a beauty. I mean, what else do we say?
Well, it's over. We're just done. Thank you for having me. Good night, ladies. It's all true. Everything she said was true. I need to say nothing more.
Yeah, exactly. How could you can't even just stop talking?
No,
just literally stop talking right now. That was beautiful.
I mean,
wow.
We got to talk about how I met Jonae. So I was a police chief at the time. I was speaking at a community event. Jonae challenged me. We had an interesting interaction. I knew this woman is somebody you shouldn't mess with because she wants to know the truth. We connected offline and really started churning on some issues that make a difference in communities and in communities of color. And so she challenged me. We had a mutual respect and understanding. At least I respected and understood her. She was challenging my shit.
It was mutual.
But how could I not immediately love this human being? So Jonae, you get to meet Kristen Zeman.
Kristen Zeman, nice to meet you both. So, Chief, you did me a lot of great latitude of introduction, and I appreciate that. It was mutual, but I also know then if anyone is hanging with Chief Sylvia Moore, then Chief Kristen Zeman is also a force to be reckoned with. So let's hope I can keep it up today, ladies.
Jonae, and now she's a producer.
Jonae.
Now she's a producer.
I am a producer, Jonae.
I apologize.
Jonae, I want to hear about your recollection of that first meeting. Would you describe it in the same way that
this is happening?
Moyer?
Well, Chief Moyer really gave the diluted version. The one that she normally tells has me throwing paper airplanes, from the back of the conference room, interrupting, haggling. No, it's really not that bad. But what we did is I recognized that in her presentation, it was more than just fluff. It was more than just surface, and I could hear a true commitment to community work and integration and making a difference. And so when you recognize that, not just in people around you, but people in positions of power, that's what it is, right? The privilege of power, but there was this humility and this real desire to learn as well, that it's a two-way street of education. I figured I could roll up my sleeves with Chief Moyer and make some good things happen. And didn't know at that day that our journey would come together, but it certainly did. And don't regret it for one moment.
Oh, Sylvia, it sounds to me like you are a solid bunny. This is exactly what we're talking about. And if I may, though, I would love to just pull that thread before you start launching questions. So, but when you just said, the power, use of power, it strikes me as that people in those positions, and you can call them power, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing. Sometimes we have this negative connotation of the powerful, but if you use your power for good and not power over, but power with, that's what matters. So that's it's wonderful for me to hear about your background together and the difference that you both made.
Absolutely. There's power, there's empowering, there's distributed power. There are all of the things that can come from power. Really, when you even talk about allyship and knowing when to fold to a more powerful voice, it does not mean that it's an antagonistic or a positional power perspective. Wow. It is who has the voice in the room and who has the right voice to carry a message, and being humble enough to sit down for that as well. I think being nimble in leadership like that, I saw that from Chief Moore, who empowered me in many ways, said, this is a person that I think can speak to this message. And I think that's an example that many of us in leadership can honor and model.
Oh, wow. Come on now. All right. Well, thank you. Super humbled. This is really about amplifying this amazing voice that you have, this work that you have. You've already given us stuff that listeners of the Hollow Bunny podcast often pull over and write some of this stuff down. So they're going to be writing down some Jonae Harrison wisdom here. So Jonae, let's go back to starting with this story about how you grew up in Oakland, and how did that inform kind of your view of the world?
Oh my gosh, this answer as each year goes by really changes for me, right? Because the Oakland and the Bay Area of today versus the 70s, the 80s is completely different. And so even how it informs in both positive and negative ways, it's really extraordinary. So I will say, I love to tell people I didn't grow up in today's Oakland, that there were runners in the streets. If you were running, it usually was because you were running from something. There was a helicopter overhead, and this is not an exaggeration to me. I went to sleep with the sounds of helicopters and spotlights in my backyard and gunshots. And it wasn't until I probably was in my 20s and I was living in my own home, and I lived in a particular area that was very quiet. And at maybe 26 years old was the first time I noticed silence, right? I could, and I was laying in bed and I said, what's missing? The power of absence of things that you take for granted. And so it informed me in terms of my parents would say, hear your voices, Jonae. You can be a teen mom, you can get into gangs and violence, or you can use education as your avenue away. And so education, boarding school, I left home at 13 years old to go to boarding school because I knew my choices were that disparate, right? I'm 5'3.5" on a good day. I speak like I'm 6'3" on any, but the truth was I was tiny with big glasses and I got bullied all the time, right? And so you don't go into public schools like that.
Yeah.
And so when I went straight through for college and for law school, and when I got to practice, one of the things that stuck out for me, I worked in the Maricopa County Attorney's Office as a prosecutor. And I enjoyed so much that work because, as you all know, in law enforcement, that besides the judge, the prosecutor really has the most power in that courtroom
Heck
to
yeah.
make a plea, to talk about what kind of charges are presented. And so it was my mission to work in juvenile law. At that time, I'd been a tax attorney for 6 years. And when I went over to MCAO, they said, "What do you mean? We want you in white collar crime." I said, "No, I can make money differently. I want to be in juvenile law because I understand these kids and I understand the background that they're coming from." I got to talk more with the defendants in that time. We went to charter schools and alternate schools talking about how to avoid criminal sanctions and criminal interactions prematurely. What are your rights? How do you know what truancy is like? Just a collaboration. So all of that informed having this real sense of connectivity to people and purpose.
Can we go backwards, because I don't have the benefit of knowing you like Sylvia does, so there's just some major gaps here for me. So
Yes.
I'm hearing Dominican, Tulane, Georgetown, and you went away to boarding school. So you're at boarding school. At what part in your life are you thinking, I want to go to college and become an attorney? So please, pave that path for me about how your life unfolds in that way, in that chronological order.
And Kristen, you are not far behind. It has been that journeyed and that storied of a history, and proudly so. So I grew up, Kristen, saying I wanted to be a preacher and a lawyer. 6 years old. I remember I was in the backyard looking up the crack house next door. This is not a joke. This is the truth. The roof of the crack house next door. And I said, a preacher and a lawyer.
Okay.
A preacher and a lawyer.
Okay.
And not just a lawyer. No. I was very specific in my dreams. I wanted to be an international real estate attorney. Had no clue what that meant. None. But it sounded so good.
I love it. I love it. I love it.
But actually, Kristen, I ended up doing both. So I feel like I will take you on a journey, right? So
Okay.
it was this commitment to, that was my foundation, the church, right? Having a Black female pastor, which born when she passed away was 95 years old in 2021. So she was born in the early 1900s, and having a female strong leader, that was that role model for me, what it meant to be a preacher, right? A woman that could carry a sermon and hold an audience and, preach love. And so I held that. But I knew, as I said, that I wasn't a sports person. I wasn't, super athletic, but I was educationally inclined. And so there was a program called A Better Chance that took students of color out of the inner city and placed us in the top prep and boarding schools in the country.
Wow.
And that program actually still exists today. Yeah, it's a phenomenal program. And the only caveat that my parents gave me was that because I started high school at 13, they would not let me leave the state of California. So I went to an all-girls boarding school right in the Bay Area, San Domenico, which is now co-ed, and I voted against that, but we're not talking about that, are we, Kristen?
Next one.
Yeah.
That's part two.
Boys are
Next Hollow Bunny.
distractions. Version 3.
I didn't even realize there were no boys until my sophomore year because there was no competition. Like, I was the most brilliant. Duh. Right?
Duh.
Right.
Oh, wait, hold on. Oh, man, I missed it. See, I was trying to...
Producer Ted.
I was trying to do a drum joke, but it's my first day, so go ahead.
So, but Kristen and still knows this, I never lost sight of that duality.
Yeah.
And so I went straight through to college, a Spanish and English double major. And I wanted to see, based on that background, whether Spanish-speaking countries of African descent, like in Cuba, like in Panama, like in the Dominican Republic, had similar cultural connections as those African Americans that lived in the South. And so my dad and his family were from New Orleans. Everything from um, colorism to religion, all of the aspects of the full African American life, whether that was mirrored in Spanish speaking countries of African descent. And so I went down to the Dominican Republic as a part of my study abroad. And I studied that. I wrote a portion of my law school. One of my classes was about that very thing, law in the Dominican Republic, color in the Dominican Republic, and how we see some of the similarities, even like familial relationships. And so I went down to the Dominican Republic, then came right back up, finished undergrad, and went straight to Tulane, where I went in and came out in 3 years and started practicing. I mean, I'm tired, Kristen. That is all of the story.
Right?
Our bunny's tired. Our bunny's tired. That's all I just need validation. It's okay to be
Yes.
tired.
Yes, bunnies can be tired. That's when they start melting. So we've got to just get you solid again. It's fine.
Amazing.
So even in that, it's a blessing. It's a privilege. And I was even going to say, and then I'll be quiet because there's questions and answers. But one of the things that I was able to do in practicing law, I lived in Texas for a little bit, is I walked away from full-time practice and went into ministry full-time. So I actually was able to be a preacher and a lawyer.
So you did both of those things.
I did.
Fulfilled those dreams. That's absolutely incredible. Wow. Impressive.
Right. And now you see, Kristen, why my mouth just hangs open, that I am in the same kind of atmosphere as Jonae. And Jonae, all of that informs how you show up, right? And so much of what we talk about is, look at all these experiences you've had. Is there one that took you down a leadership path, down a life path, that but for that one experience, you wouldn't be this influential COO that you are now?
It's very interesting. That's a really tough question, because I think this has been a collection of experiences that I always have to go back to people first, right? We talk about it. You can talk about law. I was at Department of Treasury as a tax attorney for the feds, and had a letter from one of the taxpayers to my boss that said, but for Jonae, this would not have been a good experience. I was the opposition to her. I should have been in an antagonistic role for her, but I wanted to make sure that she was okay. Right? Shifting over, working in ministry, it's like making sure the heart of a person is taken care of. I say here in this current role, 2023, people over profit. That's not a model that you hear a lot of times, especially in corporate world. It's like, well, but how do you make profit but by prioritizing the people, right?
Oh,
That people feel valued.
Jonae.
So, and it sounds to me, there's no wonder that you're tired, because you have lived 1,000 lives, and I think that is what is the most special, because all of these things that you set out to do, you've checked that box. So then, tell me and help me reconcile. Then you're doing ministry and then practicing law. You work in Tempe. So then, how does this translate to healthcare?
Yeah.
And what in that combination of those 1,000 lives that you have lived, is what you're practicing now in alignment with this, purpose and mission of, people over profit.
I love what you're saying, and it does. And it took me looking hindsight, because mid-career, it did feel disjointed. And I like to talk about that a lot of time with young people and young professionals, that they think that the path has to be linear. but the path is truly dynamic as long as your eye is on the lesson and the character building that happens in each of your positions. That you never leave a job without having also acquired a talent, a skill, which should also include people. So for me, Kristen, when I look at, I've done tax and bankruptcy and immigration and prosecution. And then when I stepped away from law altogether, ministry allowed me to take that courageous leap to focus only on people. But here's the amazing thing is that I did this in a very healthy environment. When you look at corporations and climbing the corporate ladder, it's very fraught with tension and competition, and nobody's caring how you're doing personally. Really, it's what kind of results, what are your deliverables, what are your KPIs, right? Key performance indicators instead of people focused, right? And so when I stepped away and I actually went into ministry, it was at a 10,000 person congregation. I worked in the youth department over operations of 1,000. So I'm running operations and the most healthy environment that I could learn that, right? And so I take that and then I shift over because I'm no longer doing law on a full-time basis and I move over into policy work. That's where Sil and I met. So someone said to me, practicing law is like looking at law from the rearview mirror, whereas policy is shaping it from the front windshield. So here we've got some themes. We've got rear view window, policies, litigation, championing, advocating. We've got ministry that's looking like serving people and how are people doing and understanding how people shape this world and how they show up in the world based on the condition of their heart. You take that and you take policy work. How do I look at equitable policies, distribute them across an entire city, knowing that people are struggling, their hearts, their finances, their environments are struggling, meeting them where they are, and then understanding that work like community development, making sure people have the right places to live, the right access to transportation, the right access to education, the right housing for them, especially within post-COVID environment. That's what you call the social determinants of health. Healthcare is not just how we show up in our bodies and our minds, but what is the ecosystem in which we live that determine our lifespan. So when I began to transition here to Ante, that put all of the pieces together. I came on as their general counsel. Immigration, employment law, contract law, prosecution, defense, all of that was honed together under general
Synchronicity.
counsel. There it is. I didn't understand it in the process. It makes sense now.
Okay. So Kristen and I have been talking about this Marshall Goldsmith book, An Earned Life. And in it, he talked about how not the one-trick pony, that kind of condemnation, right? So we say that, and it's like the person that only does one thing. Let's put that aside. But the one-trick genius, right? And how this whole, it's like, you just described what Marshall Goldsmith described when he talked about it's like a loaf of bread, right? It takes this whole career, this whole time, all of these years, all of these experiences like a loaf of bread. Each thing that you described is like a slice. And now you are
Yes.
in this place, Jonae Harrison. We take all those slices, and now you're down to maybe 2 slices that are really your genius. And that,
You know what's interesting, Sil? And I didn't mean to cut you off.
please do.
One slice can feed one person. One loaf can feed a family, right?
Right?
Whoa. I was just going to ask you where you came up with that loaf metaphor, but then she just took it to another level. So I'm not mad at it anymore.
You're
But I was
not.
like, a loaf of bread? Really?
That's how we roll.
Miss Jonae, you just gave all of the Hollow Bunny podcast listeners something really important. And those that are early in their careers, maybe mid-career, they're like, gosh, I've tried this specialty, that specialty, and I went to detectives, and I went to, all these different things, name it, in an organization. And you've just given them this beautiful permission to lean into that and to be okay with trying all these specialties to find that thing that you're really frigging good at. You just gave this incredible gift to people.
Not only that, and I love because you mentioned it earlier about the advice that you give, especially to young women. And it reminded me a lot of Sheryl Sandberg's book, Lean In, when she describes our careers, notably as these quote ladders, the ladders we climb in our career. I don't know why that's happening. The ladders climbing.
She just gave herself
And
confetti.
Instead,
she just gave herself freaking confetti.
I don't know what's happening.
Bullshit.
I don't know how to work. Listen, bunnies, you can't see us, but a confetti just fell behind me, virtual confetti, and I didn't do it. So I didn't touch any of the controls, producer Ted. I don't know what is going on. But anyway, to finish my thought,
please do.
To finish my thought is that this ladder, right, is like this quote ladder of success, when she says that instead, our lives, especially our careers, are more like monkey bars. It's where we're kind of swinging from one place to another, and then we fall, we dust our knees off and we jump back on. And, it is in doing that and kind of exploring all the different areas on those monkey bars where we really become aligned to what we love to do, or even more importantly, what we can best serve the world, what talents that we have that best serve others. And that sounds exactly, we can use any metaphor, but that's exactly what you're saying. And I love that advice in giving it to young people. And you would be one of the ones I would hold up and say, model this, just live 1,000 lives, all the things. You can be a minister, you can be an attorney, you can be all of the things, and to continue doing the work that you do that align to that higher purpose is
the mistake is to miss an opportunity.
Yep.
No, before that, the mistake is not to recognize an opportunity, because you're so geared towards that next monkey ring, or you're so geared towards that next moment that you fail to fully capture what you're gathering and gleaning where you are, right? And oftentimes, and there's so many studies about this in workforce and pay equity and what we as women do and what we think we're worthy of, and what salaries and what job descriptions and what positions we can take. And it's always a barrier for us. But when you mightily note and are conscious and cognizant of the work that you're doing, the impact that you're making, it's not a prideful thing. It's also, when the 1,000 lives gets very tedious, to be able to celebrate some achievements as well. Because if you can't look back and say, well done to yourself, you'll never be able to thrive, even if you get that recognition externally. If you can't believe it about yourself, no one can convince you otherwise.
Yeah, it's like without a doubt, right? And so I want to pull on this thing with you, Miss Jonae. You've served in all levels of government, local and federal. I can't see you as a tax attorney. I mean, you're way too good of a time to be a tax attorney. But hey, that lady was super pleased. Come on. But
right.
I can't see
I had a red briefcase. Does that matter? I had a red briefcase.
Fabulous. Kristen and I love talking about our bags.
That sasses it up.
Yeah. That's the reason.
Okay, so I have a question for you, because a lot of our Hollow Bunny podcast listeners want to know about the difference between private and public service. I mean, are there leadership differences? How can you kind of put a light on that for us? Those of us that really want to know kind of the distinguishing characteristics with that.
Oh, I can. And now I have to decide what level of truth to give. I think our rating is good, right? Our rating. There are benefits to them all, right? There is a certain level of verve and drive within, and pace, I will say, within private practice. But before I even say that, I think there's really a fallacy in starting what the difference is between private and public practice. I'm going to pull us off just a little bit. I think the first question is who you are as an individual. and what's important to you, right? Because oftentimes service work is oriented around a story that is other, right? And it's not to say that climbing the corporate ladder does not make a difference, right? This is the true transformation that we're seeing in technology and AI, and that is not in the public realm. In fact, all of our leaders are praying to the feds, please do something on AI regulation. So we're having true impact there. But what is it that rings your bell as an individual in this phase of your life? So, for example, private, for me, was not aligned to who I was as a person.
Okay,
I
there's the
wanted
key,
to
right?
be yes.
Say that
I
again.
wanted to be able to be, it wasn't aligned to who I was as a person.
Okay.
I wanted to show up authentically as my full self. I did not want to have to fit into a mold that fit into a matrix that allowed me to rise in a system of merit or increase or hierarchy. I wanted to show up fully as myself, playing the game that was written for my life, not another's, and how I unfolded my career. And I found that doesn't mean it's everyone's journey, a little more latitude for how I was built to stay within the public nonprofit sector. But the keys and the skills that are honed within private are oftentimes those things that sharpen and help to elevate some of the public sector work. So it's a wonderful myriad of both worlds.
Ha, that's so cool. Okay, so how have you dealt with conflict in mission? Right? Let's just say, I mean, that's one of the leadership things. Those that listen to the Hollow Bunny podcast want to get little bites, little nibbles on their life and on their leadership journey. So how have you dealt with conflict as a leader? I mean, I'm thinking maybe the minister piece made you not bitch slap people.
Or at least pray faster about it.
You're like, bless your heart. Like,
Right.
That means like, screw
I am,
you. Okay, got it. But
I am a work in progress.
aren't we all?
Right. What's interesting, I really think a part of the time post George Floyd, right? And where like my father did diversity work, and really his entire career and profession. And so you go from affirmative action to EEO to diversity and inclusion to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And my dad would say to me, I've forgotten more than you'll ever learn. And it was, right? But in this very tense post George Floyd national and international interface, there were small wins that you try to make that are sometimes because of newness, sometimes because of the need to educate and inform and really blend together people that have common interests and common goals, that the conflict sometimes can be resolved in acknowledging the smaller wins.
Okay.
Oftentimes we want to have these huge gains and these huge leaps. And that's the same thing that I'm saying personally, without failing to say, here was this micro bite we both took together, even in the face of conflict, right?
Yeah.
So then even to what Sil was saying in terms of trying to work within a position of service, right? That certainly within the church context, right? People come up as people. The ministers are people. Everybody has a bad day. And recognizing the humanity in each of us. Instead of leading without empathy, how about to switch your perspective to be an empathetic one in the face of conflict? That's what I think about.
Yeah, that's a big deal. I mean, okay, so we're kind of getting toward, the closing kind of pieces of our Hollow Bunny podcast time with Jonae Harrison, an amazing, amazing person and leader. So, okay, Jonae, have you worked around a hollow bunny like that? Come on, what it look
Well,
like?
listen.
Here she's like, look, listen. Hmm.
Oh,
We need
first
to
of all, I
ask
have
this
to
of
say I
all of
love
our
your.
guests. Wait, say it again. I'm sorry.
First, I have to speak to the logo because it just spoke to every just ounce of me. I'm like, yeah, that's the first thing I want to do when I'm giving anybody. I bite the head off. You all do it nicely with the ear. I bite the head off, and I'm like, what's on the inside of this? Yeah. What is made on the inside of this, and is
Savage.
it worth my? Are these empty calories? Like, gonna be
That's
good
right.
for me,
That's
right?
right. Yeah.
But yeah, I think I have worked for Hollow Bunnies, right? But again, in the context and really the theme of what I'm sharing is there were plenty of Hollow Bunnies that could have sent me off rail and off track
Yeah.
and derailed me from what my purpose was. Because oftentimes Hollow Bunnies will also keep you limited and in the
Mm.
shadows,
Huh.
right? Because there is no substance. And so when you recognize that Hollow Bunny is female, Hollow Bunny is male, Hollow Bunny is a system, right?
Mhm.
I came up with this saying is sometimes you face opposition not to derail you, but to see how committed you are to the process. So
Ooh.
when you have a Hollow Bunny that's in front of you and trying to get you off guard and have you jumping in too early or too late, how do you reposition? And how do you figure out one to leverage because they're still there for a reason, how to leverage, how to begin to build on, but still trust and push what your purpose is in that organization, which also means who are the bunnies that aren't hollow in there that can sing and certainly support the work that you're doing. And I have met a lot of bunnies that are filled with nice
Mm.
truffles. Mhm.
Oh, I love that. And there is such a lesson there for our listeners who, as we know from having personal conversations, that they're trying to be derailed by some hollow bunnies, those who take credit or even just try to push them off the path altogether. And as you said, that opposition really does make you question your commitment to the cause. And then you double down on the cause that you believe in and you continue going. And I love that the most when you say, then you look for other solid bunnies to do the work with. That is the most powerful thing I think I have heard in relation to our ridiculous little metaphor. And I love it so much. Thank you for being here with us.
Thank you for having me. Chief Moore is one of my solid bunnies, so I'm happy to hop along with you and clearly meet you, Kristen. I hope there were some valuable nuggets in there. And next year will look different for all of us. We will learn something else to fill our bunny
No
and
doubt.
keep.
Absolutely.
Janae, thanks for being a
Absolutely. Yeah, keep
bright
fighting
light
the
in
good
this
fight.
world. Bright light in this world, fighting the fight. You're gritty and you're just remarkable. Thank you.
I have one final question then. Will you be pursuing international real estate once we get off this Zoom, this podcast?
Listen, I think owning international real estate sounds a little better at this point.
Okay.
In
Okay.
some,
Well, I was just thinking, what a slacker. I mean, you really haven't checked that box. So
you know,
maybe you can come back on when you've got more to report.
You know
Okay.
what? I did know a little bit of Foreign Corruption Practices Act out of Mexico, and there were some real estate deals in that. So maybe I'll jump.
Okay. Check.
Ah,
Okay. Check that box. Okay.
uh-huh.
Well,
We're watching
thank
you.
you so much for being here.
I'm watching you
Yes, we
both.
are. Well, thank you. And everyone, thank you as always for joining our podcast. This podcast is usually produced by Ted Madden, but he's incarcerated. We're going to go bond him out. After this podcast, because I am the producer of this podcast, which is why everything went wrong behind the scenes. The song that you are about to hear was written and performed exclusively by my handsome and talented son, Jake Zeman, and his accomplished friends. If you like our podcast, and how could you not? How could you not like our podcast? So if you do, Subscribe, like, review, and tell everyone you know about it. If you didn't like it, what do you know about podcasts or literally anything?
Shit.
Everyone, keep filling your own bunnies with substance, and please keep adding substance to others. Bye, everybody.
When you look inside, what do you find? Are you content to fall behind? When you lose your way and you've lost your why, have courage and get ready to fight the hollow bunny. When the way ahead is covered in smoke and you're tired and you're scared and you're losing hope, you'll open your heart and your eyes to see a challenge and a question. Why not me? To fight the hollow bunny. And we all feel hollow sometimes, but the monsters are only in your mind. It's a tough pill to swallow, but if you're brave and kind, you'll be alright. If you fight the hollow bunny. When the challenge ahead scares you to death, you tame the imposter inside instead. To change the world, you've got to start small. It takes a leader to say, I don't know it all. And I know I'm gonna fall, but I'll pick it up and come back stronger. Failing forward and moving onward, doing the hard thing and the right thing, forever fighting the hollow bunny. And we all feel hollow sometimes, but the monsters are only in your mind. It's a tough pill to swallow, but if you're brave and kind, you'll be alright. If you fight the hollow bunny. If you're tough on the outside but empty within, something's gonna crack, you've gotta